Hello, everybody. Welcome to DirectX Surface Unavailable. Just kidding, it's Master of Orion 3, the oft-forgotten sequel to the genre-defining Master of Orion 2. This is one of those forgotten games. Is it a forgotten gem? Well, it wasn't very well received by the community in general, but I like it, and so we're going to play it. Now, a few days ago, I finally got this game to work on a modern PC, which is very, very challenging. And so I did a huge, like a 9 hour stream just to kind of dip back into the game. And I've been playing it a lot since then, just trying out different races, trying to remember how a lot of the game mechanics works. A lot of the game mechanics work. And so what I'd like to do is, before I dive into another Let's Play, I wanted to maybe do a couple of episodes more as an introduction to explain a lot of the mechanics in this game, because it is not going to make sense to a lot of people if you want to pick up the game and give it a try. So you can get this game on GOG, you can get it on Steam. Getting it to work, like I said, is very tricky. I'm not going to go into all the technical details. There is a pretty good post in one of the Steam community discussion, forum things for this game. Somebody has a reply that pretty much lists like all the different steps that help to get it to work. The important thing, you need to run it in 16-bit color mode, and things like that. The important thing is that you need to patch the game using and you need this whether or not you can get it to work on your PC. You need to do this because one of the problems with this game is that there are a bunch of mechanics that are just kind of janky or kind of broken, just because, like the game doesn't read a certain value from a text file or whatever, right? There are a few like little bugs like that that have been patched in a community patch called Bruick's patch. Well, I guess it was made by a guy called Bruick. And so that is important. It is important that you run that. Now, there are many patches. It patches the executable, basically. And some of the patches are basically mods that change balance in the game. But most of them are just patches to make mechanics work that didn't work in the default game that should be working. Now, built on top of that, there's a series of community patches called Vanilla, Strawberry, Chocolate, which add more modding to the game. So Vanilla doesn't. Vanilla, the idea is it's a bit more than just the basic Bruick patch, but all it does, it doesn't try to change any of the in-game balance. It just tries to make the game kind of more playable as is. And then Strawberry and Chocolate add increasing levels of modding and balance changes. So we're going to try to get as close to the original vanilla experience as possible. Okay, let's dig in. So it's Master of Orion. So there are some races here that you will remember. We've got the humanoids, of which there are three. The humans, Evons, and Cylons. We've got the cybernetic machine races. We've got the Mechlar and the Cynoids. We've got the Saurians, a reptilian race, the Sacra, the Raas, and the Grendarl. We've got the Ichthyosians, which are sort of underwater dwellers, the Trilarians and the Nomo. The Etherians, which are sort of creatures that live in gas giants, the Imzaes and the Eoladi. We've got the Geodics. These are our silicoid crystal buddies. We've got the Insecta, the Klakon, and the Takidi. And we've got the Harvester, a sort of parasite race called the Ithkul. Now, each of these species, and by that I mean like the categories, so like humanoid, for example, or Saurian, have a set of bonuses beyond all these, things that you can customize, for example, their bioharvesting or accuracy or whatever. So, for example, the humanoids have a built-in bonus to diplomacy on top of whatever you do here in diplomacy, as well as like Senate effectiveness, so their votes in the Senate are more effective. The cybernetics and the Saurians and the Insecta have built-in bonuses to manufacturing, for example, right? So when you're designing your race, there's not just the race details here that matter, but also sort of the underlying species. One important thing to note is that the harvesters, these parasitic beings, are coded so that if they're in the game, they will always go to war against everybody, and if you are playing as them, then everybody will always go to war against you. So their kind of stats and bonuses are on average better than all the other races, but you're going to be in a state of constant war. So in order to win the game, you can either do it by achieving a Senate victory, which means that you have to be a member of the Senate, and then you basically have to have a lot of population. But that also means that if you're not in the Senate, then you have to fight your way into the core of the galaxy, because the Senate starts at the core of the galaxy. You have to fight your way in to destroy whatever species is going to win the Senate victory before they do. So that's a big part of the game. So let me just take the humans here as an example. You can spend 10 design points to force yourself to either be a member of the Senate or not be a member of the Senate. And that could be an important consideration, because probably if you play this game on a fairly high difficulty level and you start outside the Senate, you're most likely to lose because there was some reptilian or insecta, which have high population growth rate, that just ran out of control in the Senate and won a victory like that. So that's definitely something you have to think about. And it also means that you might want to play a sort of peaceful science research kind of game, but you are going to have to do some kind of military campaign to stop the Senate victory from happening. Speaking of which, there's another way you can win, which is the Antaran victory. That basically involves research projects and things like that. And then, of course, there's the military victory where you are the sole survivor. Now, for the purposes of these videos, which might transform into a Let's Play afterwards, I'm going to play the latest kind of race that I've been playing with, and is a Saurian race. It is the Raas. Now, there are kind of a few different, maybe 2 or 3 different kind of overall builds that you can go for. I guess the main thing is, are you going to go high manufacturing, a lot of industrial capacity, or not? And are you going to have good research or not? And then kind of how is your population growth going to factor into this? And how are you going to compensate for each of these 3 kind of major areas? So if we look at the Clacons, which is what I did my stream with, the Clacons have very good population growth, very good manufacturing, terrible research, and also terrible spying. So that gameplay is going to have you build. You're going to be able to expand quite easily. Your population growth is going to be great. You have a good environmental attribute here, because it's very cheap to buy the superior one, which means you're going to be able to terraform easily. So you really can just go and build. You can build like a ton of colony ships for super fast because you have great manufacturing. And then you can just drop colony ships on every planet, even the most, red. There's a terraforming system where it goes red, yellow, green, and then sweet spot. Even on red planets, you'll just terraform them all eventually. But you need to do that because, first of all, you prefer small worlds, so you need to, your starting planet is going to be small, so in order to have a high population, you just need to colonize a lot of planets. And also, you need to be running like 1 million small research colonies to make up for your terrible research stats. Even so, because of your bad creativity and your lack of spying, you're going to miss out on a ton of technologies. And I'll explain the creativity system a bit later. You're going to miss out on a ton of tech. So your tech choices are going to be limited. You're just going to have to make do with what you've got, except you're going to have, 10 times more stuff than the opponent. So that's kind of how the Clacons play. At the other extreme, now I guess I should say, there are other races that also focus on manufacturing. For example, the Cybernetics have a phenomenal built-in manufacturing bonus, the highest in the game. they have interesting mechanics where their food, they eat minerals too. But so their manufacturing is going to be really high. Some of the cybernetics have great spying, for example. So here your research is going to be great as well. So you'll have high manufacturing, good research, good spying, but your population growth and your ability to expand is nowhere near the same. It's not even close to what it is with the insecta. So it's going to be still high manufacturing, but here it's going to be like a fewer colonies of higher quality, whereas insecta are just going to colonize everything in sight. At the other extreme, you could have something like the Cylons, which are sort of the classical high research but terrible at everything else race. So weak humanoids, just phenomenal research and creativity. You'll get all the tech, you'll get it faster than everybody, but your population growth, your manufacturing capacity, your economy overall is pretty poor. Now, you have very good diplomacy and things like that. So the idea here is definitely to go for peaceful relations with your neighbors, get a few good colonies, and if you do have to fight, you'll do so successfully because you'll be like a tech generation or two ahead of your opponent, and hopefully also your access to advanced economic technologies will make up for your bad, industry modifiers that the race has. The other species that tends to do very well in technology are the Ichthyosians, the underwater creatures, the Trilarians, and the Nomo. They also have fantastic research, and they have a much more balanced economy. They also have a pretty decent, like, their terraforming is okay, but they like their natural environment are these large planets, so you tend to have some really nice high quality colonies with these. Their military capacity, their actual physical bodies in terms of ground troops are pretty weak, but this is sort of a kind of race where you can have great research but not sacrifice too much in terms of your economy, in terms of your farming your minerals, your manufacturing, and things like that. Anyways, there are a lot of advantages and disadvantages to each race, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to customize a race of the Raas, these reptilian creatures. Now, these are the Sakra are an original species in the original Master of Orion, and in the lore, the Raas were enslaved by the Sakra and have fought a war to liberate themselves, and now they're their own species. The Saurians have a few defining characteristics. They have a good manufacturing bonus. They also have the biggest terraform rings of any race. And what that means is that they consider a much wider range of temperatures and pressures and sort of gaseousness to be comfortable to them, which means many, many more planets will appear to be green at first, or even yellow, which means it's very easy to colonize worlds that you want. Most worlds are going to be much more easily colonizable by you. In addition, with their good population growth rate and manufacturing efficiency, you can actually get fantastic manufacturing capabilities. So we're going to try to emphasize that in our species. So let's take a look at what the default picks are. We've got good bioharvesting, so slightly better than average. The mining by default is average. By the way, for bioharvesting and mining, you can see here on the right that the bonus that you get is you get an additional +1 to the farming efficiency, which is the DEA, like the amount of food that you just get from an economic zone devoted to farming. But in addition, you get more rare materials. So in Master of Orion 3, if you have a surplus of food or of minerals, you actually produce money. Actually, it's not so much a surplus, just your farms do produce money and your mines do produce money, which is traded in spaceports and things like that. So this means that you can actually contribute to your economy by having farms if your bioharvesting is good. Okay, manufacturing, also same idea. You add to your manufacturing efficiency, and you also add to the value that is created by your industrial sector. But you also add industry per population point, and that's something very interesting. So first of all, built in, we have superior manufacturing, which is great already. Our research by default is average, which is fine. Our trade by default is good. Now, trade is good because if you have good diplomacy, then you'll typically be friendly with several different empires, and you'll have trade treaties going, and those can contribute a lot of income, and then you're getting a flat 10 or 20% bonus to that. However, here you're also getting +1 to spaceport efficiency. A spaceport is a pretty early building that you can build in your regions, on your planets, and they generate a lot of income. So trade is a nice stat to get if you can get it. Environmental is our ability to terraform and also the effect of pollution. Now, it's ironic because the Raas, as a saurian species, have great terraform rings, but their actual ability to terraform beyond that is limited. Plus, they get by default a big pollution increase penalty. Now, accuracy, reflexes, and toughness are a measure of how good the ground troops are. Now, it's interesting that in the default game, in the vanilla game, these do nothing. These picks, you can change them, but they don't actually impact the game. So that's one of the things that's patched with the Brick Patcher, is that these picks actually matter. Okay, by default, our diplomacy is good, which is slightly better than average, just as straight up makes it easier to get agreements with other people. Our government type is the worst. It's absolutist, and we, unless you spend a lot of design points, you won't be able to get representative or collectivist. Our starting citizenship is average association. We don't have any particular bonuses or penalties to unrest. Our default cunning is sharp, again, average. And our default creativity is normal, again, average. So, how, if at all, are we going to customize this race? Well, we have great manufacturing potential, great growth potential, but there are a few things that are kind of in the way. So we have great terraforming rings, but because our environmental is poor, we're taking a big hit in terms of pollution. I'm going to try to bump this up to average, just so we can actually terraform even further, kind of double down on that advantage of ours. And also so that we don't have such a steep penalty to pollution, because we are going to have great manufacturing. Another thing that I would like to get is in special attributes. There are a few features here. So Untyrant background helps with an Untyrant victory. Not that we're not gonna try for that victory. We might, but that's not what we're going to emphasize. We can get a diplomacy bonus. We can get a pollution reduction for 20 points. We can get a trading bonus, but what I want to try is natural engineers, which adds one industry per population point. And I think what I want to do is leverage this race's amazing population growth and ability to colonize all sorts of planets to rely on sheer population to make to just boost our industry. So we now are at -50. We have to go find some. We got to go find some design points somewhere. So the first place I'm going to go is I'm going to go to diplomacy, and I'm actually going to bring this down to poor. Now, there's a lot of the diplomacy in this game is determined by the species. So, for example, no matter what, we're always going to be at war with the Ichthyosians, with the underwater races. That's just sort of built into the lore of the game. Now, if you go with poor or average diplomacy, it might be challenging to get non-aggression pacts with a few other species as well. But we're just going to risk it, and it'll make it a more spicy playthrough, and there'll be perhaps more conflict. We'll see if we can pull through. Now, the other place I'm going to get design points is I'm going to go to trade, and I'm going to bring this down to average. I would actually really like to get superior for increased spaceport efficiency, but one of the reasons for doing that is with our poor diplomacy, we're less likely to have many trade agreements. So the bonus we're getting to trade agreements here is, a bit anti-synergistic if we're taking poor diplomacy. And that's it. Those are the only changes I'm going to make to the race. And we'll see if this works out for us. We might be out in the fringes. We might be in the Senate. If we're in the Senate, we have a very good chance of winning because our population growth is going to be pretty crazy. Let's see if this happens. So I'm going to use the same kind of start that I had on the stream with the Clacons, which is going to be a large number of players on a huge galaxy with an impossible game difficulty, and all the victory conditions are enabled. So let's go ahead and start this up. And we're going to take a moment to talk about a lot of the... Okay, it looks like we did start in the Senate. So here's the galaxy. We're going to take a moment to explain a few of the game mechanics here. By the way, the map, so you hold right-click to drag. I'd forgotten this until just recently, but this is actually a 3D map. So you can use insert page up to just rotate, and you can use home and end to rotate like this. So it is actually a 3D galaxy here. Now, you don't really need to look at it from a 3D perspective. You can kind of look at it from a top-down perspective because, the stars don't usually overlap, but it can be cool to get a perspective. So especially when we're in the core of the galaxy, it might look like two planets are really close to each other when in fact they're quite far in sort of the z-axis, the vertical direction. If you don't rotate the camera, this is represented by a sort of thinner line that you'll notice sometimes, a thinner star line between the planets, which is sort of indicating that there's movement sort of perpendicular to the plane that you're looking at. Okay, there are a few things that you need to do at the beginning, and so let's do them. We're going to set our finances. We're going to keep them at peace and prosperity for now, and balanced, and yeah, we're not going to touch that. We're going to talk about development plans, I think, in a separate episode because it's important that you understand how those work. Let's set our policies really quick. I'm going to do manual colonization at the beginning, but later I will turn automatic colonization. You set your pressure meter as high as your people can handle without being too mad at you. Our regional zoning, I'll keep to natural. Because, well, it might depend on the quality of planets that we discover. If we have a really nice surplus of minerals and food, then we can go to specialized. In government type, let's look at the absolutist government types. We have despotism as an option. Here we get a penalty to mining and bioharvesting, though, while we have bonus to manufacturing and military. Monarchy gives a penalty to research and bioharvesting, again boosting manufacturing and military. Oligarchy penalizes manufacturing but boosts research. And a constitutional monarchy is pretty average with only a slight penalty to manufacturing. So I want to have a sort of balanced approach. We are obviously trying to leverage, and have fantastic manufacturing, but that doesn't mean we're not willing to take a slight penalty to it because the quality of our manufacturing is going to depend. First of all, it's going to be limited in the early game by how much minerals we can produce. And remember, we're counting on a high population to fuel our industry. So we need to be able to grow our population. So we're going to need to have enough food. So we kind of don't really want to penalize mining and bioharvesting. So we're going to go and switch over to a constitutional monarchy, which is kind of just an average government type. I should mention while I'm on this screen that there's a thing in the game called the heavy foot of government, which just kind of represents bureaucracy. You will gradually reduce it as you research technologies that just give a flat passive reduction to it. You can also kind of cheese the game because each time you switch governments, you reduce your heavy-footed government by half. Or at least that's what I've read. And there's a penalty to switching government, which is unrest, but you can kind of deal with that pretty quickly. Now, I think that's BS, and so I don't do that. I don't just randomly switch my government types for fun just to reduce the bureaucracy. That doesn't seem very realistic. It seems like switching government types would generate a lot of paperwork, not eliminate it. So we're just going to change once at the beginning and leave it at that. Finally, there is sort of a forced labor, a slavery system in the game. And I think for roleplay and thematic purposes, given that we are a species that just fought for our independence from another species that had enslaved us, I think it's only natural that we disallow forced labor. Okay, before we go to development plans, let me just quickly do a few other things. We're going to just get started on researching spies right off the bat because we are starting in the Senate. There are a lot of people in the Senate. Let's see who we've got. We've got Insecta here, the Takiti. We're going to offer trade agreements to everybody. We might not get them. We've got another insectoid race here, the Clacons. So we will have competition for the Senate victory in the Senate because these are going to have pretty high population growth rates. We've got two silicoid races. These guys can be pretty grumpy, so it's possible that we're not able to get non-aggression pacts with them because we took poor diplomacy. We've got the gas giant folks, the Eoladi. We've got two of these species. We've got some humanoids. We've got the Evons and the Cylons. And we've got another reptilian race, a race of Drendarl. So, interesting diplomatic landscape. And finally, let's do a few things. So in the shipyards, we're going to remove all these designs that we're not going to use initially. I'll keep the scout here. And let's take a look at our planet and our starting system. So this is our starting planet. Let's take a look at the other planets here. Typically, you'll see, when you click on these planets, you'll find that in your starting system, you have a ton of red and yellow. But notice here that we've got a couple of these planets that would normally be red to most nations, to most races, are in fact yellow, which is relatively easily colonizable. And that's because of our increased terraforming ring. We also apparently have a magnate civilization, which is amazing, also on a very rich planet. So that's really cool. If you look here, you see how wide these rings are. That's what we're talking about when we talk about the terraforming rings. So we have some great planets, some great colony options here in our first system. In particular, this green 2 very rich planet is for sure going to be our first colony, because that is going to ensure great mineral access to get more industry going on our homeworld. But before we get into that, we're going to end the episode, and then in the next one, we're going to talk about just the basics of DEAs and regions and how all that stuff works. So I'll see you guys then. Take care.